This is an audiobook reading of The Cemetery of the Lost Soul, a novel by Spencer Webster. Copyright 2015, all rights reserved by the author. Chapter 6, The Governor. Every normal person, in fact, is only normal on the average. His ego approximates to that of the psychotic, in some part or other, and to a greater or lesser extent. Sigmund Freud. The deep blue of the ocean gave way to a blended green-yellow as Sarge maneuvered the aluminum boat closer to shore. Julius looked toward the island which had come into view. Rocky outcroppings were flanked by white sand beaches. Off to the left, Julius noticed another smaller island, a grassy knoll from the looks of it, with white specks. Sarge embraced a scowl and chewed on a pungent cigar that sent blue, acrid smoke into the windscreen and then curling up and out of the pilot house. He glanced down at Julius a few times, but otherwise ignored him as he brought the boat closer to the sandy beach. Corporal Olathea ignored him as well, but she fidgeted. Julius noticed she had no pistol. The woman's demeanor reminded him of his wife, calm and collected. "If I'm not dead, then where is my family? Do they know I'm alive?" he wondered. "Can I get back home?" As he conceptualized the idea that he might still be alive, Julius found he missed his family, and not understanding what had happened to him only increased his agitation. The boat traveled around a stony breakwater, and then Julius saw a rickety wooden pier. Sarge slowed the boat to a crawl. Gray uniformed men, holding rifles, stood on the pier. He peered at Corporal Olathea, but she refused eye contact. The boat rubbed against the bumpers, and the corporal threw mooring lines to a soldier who tied the boat off. "You two remain here until you get the word to move," Sarge ordered as he stepped off the boat. The Sarge walked down the pier toward a short man adorned with a silver suit. The Sarge saluted crisply, and the uniformed men closest to him looked at Julius with disdain in their faces, some of them moving their fingers near the triggers. The mooring lines tightened, then slacked, and the pier creaked as the boat moved against it. As the Sarge and man in silver conferred, Julius heard a buzz gathering behind the soldiers. Soon he saw movement, groups of people pushing against the gate and fence to gain access to the pier. Uniformed sentries struggled to stem the tide of people. "What's going on?" Julius asked the corporal. At first she didn't answer, but as the crowd gathered in numbers and intensity, yelling and shoving, she reconsidered. "Everyone wants to see you. No one's ever seen an offlander before. People will see you as an omen of bad things to come. That's the governor Sarge is speaking with." The Sarge saluted once more and walked behind and off to the side of the blond short man. The governor stared at Julius for a long set of moments, then held his hand out in palm upright. "Clothing for our guest, please." "Blankets will simply not suffice, I'm afraid." A uniformed man appeared at his side, who handed him a flat satchel secured with cotton thread. "Corporal Olathea, please hand this to our guest and see that he wears it properly. I do believe it will fit him." The woman moved off the boat and grabbed the clothing. She pulled a knife out of a holster, flicked it open, and cut through the zip tie that held Julius to the rail. Julius rubbed his wrists as he stood. He looked at the man, at the corporal, and around the boat, which offered no privacy. "You want me to dress right here?" Whispers erupted among the many guards around the leader, who held his hand up. Silence fell. "We are not a modest people, sir, but if you're so inclined, you may change behind the blanket you're currently wearing. Our esteemed corporal will hold it for you so as to shield us from viewing your offlander figure." The corporal stood with her back to Julius, arms outstretched to hold the blanket he took from around him. Julius shuffled into the itchy woolen olive drab clothing adorned with large white letters of O.L. stitched into the fabric. He put a provided pair of flip-flops on his feet. Corporal Olathea lowered the blanket and stepped aside. "Good. Now let us proceed. I've been informed that you have no wrist coat. Is this correct?" Julius shoved the sleeve up and bore it to the man. "You mean this?" The men on the pier erupted in angered tones, and once again they were silenced with a hand. "Impertinence will not be tolerated, especially by an offlander. I suggest you learn your place, or your time here will become very painful indeed." "How about you tell me what this is all about? Or perhaps you can tell me why I have to wear this monkey suit. Your vague threats hold little meaning for me." Sarge moved with a flurry of speed. His fist balled and landed with heavy boots on the deck of the boat. His fist slammed into Julius's gut, and all the air went out in a whoosh. Julius fell to his knees, tears rising like a warm tide from his eyes. "I told you," the governor said to Julius. "Drag him off that boat and take him to the Colosseum. We'll work that insolence out of him soon enough." As Julius struggled to catch his breath, strong hands grabbed him under his armpits and hauled him off the boat. He looked through teary eyes at Corporal Olathea, who wore a confused expression on her face. He tried to let his feet catch up, to walk with the guards, but they moved so fast his toes dragged on the wooden planks of the pier and picked up splinters and painful lacerations along the way. The noisy cry was forced back as the soldiers approached. Julius could hear boos and curses. He was thrown, in spite of his pain, into the back of a truck which immediately began to move. 2 guards, young boymen with porcelain skins etched in unreasoned anger, sat with him. One of the guards pulled his rifle magazine out, checked it, and slammed it back in. Julius saw through the intimidation tactic, but the sound of metal meeting metal still unnerved him. The other guard showed Julius a sneer. Despite his pain from the abuse he'd received at the hands of the others, Julius stared out at the scene beyond the truck. The road wound through a lush green tropical rainforest, replete with monkeys jumping from branch to branch, tree to tree, as the truck passed. If he wasn't in such a damned awful position, he might enjoy the beauty much more. Soon the truck stopped, and a guard stepped up to open the gate. "Let's go, pretty boy. Let's not keep the governor waiting." Julius stood and jumped into the sandy grass with a slow caution. "Are you worried your feet are going to hurt?" said one of the guards who shared the back of the truck with him. "You ought to be more concerned about what the governor's going to do to you." Julius stared at each of the soldiers with an intensity that seemed incongruous with the fear he felt, and one of them shrunk back briefly. Julius pressed his advantage. "What are you jarheads afraid of anyway? I'm just some guy with an ugly woolen outfit with the big white letter sewed on it. I'm just a guy from Portland, Washington." "Shut it off, Lander, before I close your rat hole myself." Julius obeyed, yet reserved an expression of hatred for all of them. He noticed fear in the soldiers' eyes, but I'm nothing to fear, he thought, despite my anger. They approached some cubic buildings, and he wondered which one was the Colosseum. Julius heard a scream and looked behind him toward the sound to see a man with bulging eyes, wearing little more than shredded shorts and brandishing a large stick, sprinting toward them. "Eyes forward, Offlander," the guard said as the crazy man broke through the cordon and swung. Julius saw it coming but couldn't duck in time, and a hard stick connected with the side of his head. A light flew around his skull, and he heard a cacophony of voices and beeps for a solitary moment before succumbing to the darkness. As the world came back into focus, Julius realized that he was floating in a hazy fog, without a body, and looking down upon his teenage self in his bedroom. As he hung in the air, memories arose of stories he'd read about people living through near-death experiences and hovering near their bodies. But in this case, it appeared he'd traveled back in time. He didn't even think about the inherent weirdness of the situation or the dreamlike quality to his view, or recalling his thoughts from so many years before. Julius let it roll on. Julius sat at his desk, combing through character traits he'd written on index cards for a short story antagonist. He had one day left to create a strong male character for extra credit in language arts. He wanted to find counterbalance to the wimp of a federal agent, forceful and intimidating, yet stuck with a fatal flaw that would be his undoing. He understood this to be a common theme of common superheroes. His bedroom door swung open and Julius jumped. His father barged into the room. "Get your coat, we're going for a drive," Julius' father demanded. "Where are we going?" "You don't need to worry about that, just get your coat." "I've got plans." "Well, I guess you have to cancel them. You're coming with me." "No, I'm not. I just told you I've got plans. Besides, I'm working on homework. I can't just break my plans and not do my homework." "Excuse me? It's Saturday morning. You've got plenty of time to do your homework." "No, you don't understand. I've made commitments. I just can't go." Julius saw his father's large hand moving in an arc through the air, and yet the slap still caught him by surprise. Stars erupted in his vision, and he tasted salt in his throat. His knees buckled, and he landed half on and half off his bed. His father stepped over his belongings, and in the process knocked over his tripod with an SLR camera attached. Julius watched his dad looking at the camera as it fell, and doing nothing to keep it from hitting the floor. "That'll teach you to clean this fucking mess up, won't it?" "Now, I'm wondering, who do you think you are, boy?" the man said as he stood, red-faced, over Julius. "I provide a roof over your head, a bed, clothing on your back, and the food you shovel down your throat. And you're going to disrespect me? No, that's not going to happen in my house. Got anything else to say now, Mr. Smart Boy?" Julius stared at his father with rage building in his veins like steam in pipes, and he gathered his fingers together. His father smirked. "Go ahead, I dare you. It'll be the last thing you do." Julius uncurled his fingers instead. He understood the law of gross tonnage. "Stay strong," he told himself. "Don't cry. Now get your ass up and get out to the truck." "You really got to be more grateful for what I provide for you, Julius," his father said with a calm voice. that Julius knew to be a lie as he pulled onto State Street in Marysville. Julius looked out his window at the traffic. He couldn't believe the placid exterior his dad exuded. Heavy provocation was not required to elicit instant punishment. Spare the rod, spoil the child, and all that. And after 17 years of more anger than calm, more trouble than good times, more punches and slaps than hugs, Julius had learned how to play the situation, to read emotional cues, just enough to try and stay a step ahead and not risk getting gut punched, or grounded forever, or thrown into the floor. In whatever you do, don't eat ice cream in a porcelain bowl outside of the dining room. However, it was during the times his father was quiet and expressionless that filled Julius with dread. Too many times, like today, he'd been unprepared for an ass-kicking, and so he spent more energy trying to be elsewhere, or at least appear invisible. As he replayed the bedroom scene in his mind, he mentally kicked his own ass for saying anything that countered what his father wanted, and he hadn't been remotely vigilant. The welt on his face and the soft lecture was the consequence. "You listening to me?" "Yeah." "What?" "Yes, sir." This world runs on respect, Julius, and if you want to be respected, you got to act like you deserve it, and earn it. That includes using proper English. "Yes, sir," Julius said. Julius said the words by rote. He knew his place. He knew who brought him into the world and who could damn well take him out. Besides, it wouldn't be logical to think his father would actually give two shits about what he wanted. At least not while he lived under his father's roof. But one day, his father would regret everything he'd ever done. Minutes later, his father drove his 1985 Chevy C30 pickup into State Street Square shopping center. Julius noticed the recruiting office right away and cringed. After they stepped out of the car, he followed 3 steps behind his father. The slick marketing pamphlets resting in cardboard holders with bold letters and the recruiting image of a pining woman clothed in Cracker Jacks told an adventurous story he didn't believe in. His father opened the heavy glass door with the bravado of a man who is entering an exclusive club. Julius noticed the puffed chest and straightened back of a man who aimed to impress. "Sit right there while I talk to this guy," he ordered. Julius sat and watched as his father talked with one of the sailors. Julius examined the man's black uniform, complete with a wide tie. The recruiter had many colored ribbons on his shirt, as well as a silver pin above them. It looks boring, he thought. I would never wear that uniform. A piercing pain on the side of his head pulled his attention from the recruiter. His eyesight cleared, and then he discovered he was lying down on a stainless steel table. He tried to sit up, but a hand held him down.